Welcome back to For Christ's Sakes podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Mac.
And I'm Trey.
And we have one of my friends on here, Taylor. This is Taylor Wright. She's behind all the graphics and everything. And we played softball together at ETSU, and we're actually filming in Florida right now. So I was like, you have to be on the podcast because Trey and I are here for taste testing and all the good things. So yeah, thanks for being on here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay, so walk us through kind of like how you came to know God and your relationship with Him and everything.
So I went to a softball camp. It was a Jenny Finch softball camp when I was in 8th grade. And they had a devotion on Sunday. And we had gone to church growing up, but I wasn't really serious about it. My parents kind of let me figure it out on my own, which I loved.
Yeah, that's important.
Yes, and so I went to a camp, and then I went to the devotion, and Leah Miko was talking about just kind of how she couldn't take her medals to heaven with her. You know, and that was my goal as a softball player. I was like, okay, it's either softball or church, because on Sundays we always had to pick. And so that kind of was the narrative in my head. And then after I heard that, I was like, wait, I don't need to pick, because I need to choose Jesus, and then He'll use softball. So I remember going home and just praying about it, and the Lord drew my heart to Him, and I got saved and baptized, which was great. And then my junior year of high school, I tore my ACL, and I really realized how frail life is and how frail sports are, and I was like, oh, I really was finding my identity in sports, not in the Lord and who He says I am. And so after a few months of a little bit of anger towards God, I kind of realized this was His plan, you know, to help me draw my heart back to Him, to truly who He is, and not to the sport I played.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we definitely went through that ourselves. You were the injured one most of the time, I feel like.
That would be me, yes.
Or you had all the surgeries and stuff, and I had the random weird things that happened.
It's hard, you know, being injured, especially being an athlete, because, you know, you don't want to find your identity in sports, but a big part of your identity is playing a sport, and that gets taken away from you. You really have to reevaluate what's truly important. It kind of is a reality check.
Oh, for sure.
How did you, once you realized, like, okay, my identity is in Christ, not sports, like, how did you, I don't know, kind of change your mindset and, like, use softball and whatever other, did you play other sports?
Well, I played volleyball and basketball, but I quit those when I got to high school because I knew I was going to be playing softball in college.
So how did you, like, use softball as, like, your mission field?
Yeah, well, it's actually really ironic because I feel like what I thought was going to happen was that I was going to not be good at softball anymore. But in reality, like, the Lord allowed me to use that as a platform. And so something that was really cool was that when I was hurt or when I wasn't having a good game, or when things just weren't going the way that I wanted them to, scholarship-wise or school-wise, where I wanted to go and my dreams, all eyes were on me. You know, I feel like whenever you become a Christian, people are like, I'm going to watch her mess up and just crumble. And especially in high school, and I feel like that's definitely the narrative of like, okay, let's watch her mess up, you know? And so I think it really kind of put me in check of being a light to my teammate in a way that was more than words. I think before, whenever you find your identity just in your sport, it's easy for me to say, like, oh, glory to God, or, like, this one's for God, like, whenever you hit a home run, and you're like, yeah, like, this is for you, but, like, I got kind of to where I would strike out and be like, that's you, God, you know, and it just kind of became a joke at first, but then I realized that my actions were going to tell people what I believed way more than my words, and so I realized that even in those failures, they kind of became wins, because it was a way for me to preach the gospel through my actions, and it was hard, but at the same time, God used it, you know, and so I think it was a mission field in the way that it was definitely more action than talk, which I just had never really known before.
Yeah, that is so good. I think, you know, a lot of people probably saw, I don't know, you have good seasons and bad seasons in softball and stuff, but they probably saw, like, this joy about you that I've seen personally when we played together in college, and no matter what happened, like, you still, like, I don't know, we're shining God's light, and, like, we're so joyful through it all. And I'm like, what? Like, everybody knew, just by the way you acted, that, like, you love the Lord, and just, like, you portray that and stuff. So.
And that was the goal, I think, as you get to that stage of retirement, you kind of start realizing.
We sound old.
Yeah, retirement, I say that loosely. But as you get to that stage, you're like, what do I want to be remembered by? And I think in softball, I kind of realize I wanted to be the person. That's my dog, Ellie. So
Ellie,
sorry.
you have to bring her. She has to.
Ellie, come here. Now you have to say hi because you ruined
Yes.
the moment. This is Ellie.
She's so cute.
She's our guard dog for the evening. But so sorry about that. Go lay down. And so I don't even know what I was saying.
I have no
Oh,
idea. I got
yeah.
distracted. She's protecting us.
She is. But, I wanted to reevaluate what people thought of me. You know, when I left, I wanted people to call me if something happened then.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how old I got, I wanted those people that were younger and people that were even in our grade to call me and say, like, hey, this happened in my life. I didn't want them to say, oh, Taylor used to hit moms, or Taylor, which, rare case, Taylor used to make all these cool plays. You know, I didn't want to be known for that. And I think it's those moments that people don't even really remember. They just remember how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard, you know, but at the same time, it feels a lot better and takes all the pressure off.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, you know, looking back. You know, we said
I'm so sorry. Ellie, quit it. Come here. Quit. Come here.
Hey.
We're
She
not
wants
doing
to
that.
talk on the
Okay,
podcast.
you can talk. I'm just gonna hold her. She's like,
she's so sweet.
you didn't add my story. in."
Yeah.
Quit.
What's your
We're
story,
fine.
Ellie?
We're safe.
You know Jesus.
But it's funny, you know, looking back, you know, we joke about retirement, but everyone, like, eventually, whether it's, you know, high school, college, or professional, like,
Yeah.
you eventually retire, and then when you look back, like, the games just kind of all blend together, but what you really, like, remember are, you know, like, hey, you know, we were hanging out doing this or whatever at like 11 o'clock at night or something.
Yes.
Like, that's kind of what you remember. So, to your point, it's more about how you treat people than what you actually do.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like, you know, the earlier you learn that, the better it will be. But I feel like for me, I don't know. I kind of always thought like, oh, I am a softball player, and that's all I kind of thought of myself for like so long. Like, I think it was a few years into college when I was like, oh, this doesn't define me. Like, this is not who I am. Like, I have more to me than this and stuff. And I know we've done a whole separate podcast on that, but it's crazy. But talking about how you use softball as like your mission field and stuff, Taylor was a huge part of like how I came to know God. Well, I mean, I always like believed in God and stuff, but I knew that I could go to you for questions. And so like you and Lauren Lee, like I was like, hey guys, I have like a million questions. Like, I mean, I believe in God, but like I'm still confused about so many things, and like I've done this and that, and I don't know, like, what do I even do? How do you come to know this dude? Like,
Right.
And I remember, like, us just sitting in the car, and, like, you answered all my questions, or both of y'all answered all my questions, and y'all were both like, that's from the Lord. Like, we don't even know what we just said. Like, yeah, but I felt like, I don't know, I'm sure that happened with many other people, because we could just go to you, because we knew, like, you know the Lord, so that sparked my relationship with God for sure. So thanks. I've talked about it a million times, but like you're right here now. So.
And it's not like me in any way, right? You know, it's like that's just kind of where the Lord's sovereignty in His hand is in everything. You know, it's like in those moments, I was like, I have those questions too, God. Like, go ahead and answer them for us, you know? And I think whenever we have those weaknesses and whenever we have those areas where, because in my head, I'm like, I don't know any of this, you know? But it's like from your perspective, you saw the Lord in me speaking, you know? And it's never about us, you know? It never is. And all of the words that come from us that are decent are not us, you know? They're the Lord. But yeah, I love that story. I feel like that was such a great night. We were out so late just talking about all that.
And now we're on a podcast talking about Jesus more. Oh my gosh, it's insane. Okay, so let's get into some suffering. So I know you've endured a lot of suffering, and you've still just shown Jesus' light through you during everything and stuff. So kind of talk us through like what happened.
Yeah, so there have been quite a few, but a couple things stand out in particular. And the first one's obviously my knee, which we talked about that. But something else is my sophomore year of college. I was going into my sophomore year, and I'd kind of had a rough freshman year softball-wise, and I was still kind of going back into that. My identity was in sports, and then just kind of like really focusing on things that were of the earth. I was not focusing, having an eternal perspective in any way. And then I get a call in the middle of all that. It's June 10th. That my friend had been in a car accident. Sorry. My friend had been in a car accident and was put on a ventilator. And 3 days later, we were all in a hospital and saying bye to her. And so I think in that moment, I really realized that life is so short and life is so fleeting. You know, she was 18 years old, and her name is Ashley Paget.
Is this the one you played softball with?
Yes, so
high
she was my
school?
teammate. Yeah.
Okay.
I had actually known her since middle school, but she was one of those people that, and I think this was what helped me too, is that I realized when she passed away that everyone was always talking about her heart. You know, everyone was like, she loved me so well. She always reached out. She was always the person I would call when things were going wrong. And I think it's like one of those things where you realize, okay, she was so young, and I'm young. Like, anything could happen to me at any moment, and I don't want to spend my days focusing on such little things that really don't matter.
Oh, for sure.
But that was one instance where I think really things really took a turn for me, for sure. Yeah. That was the first time I really remember suffering, you know.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I feel like, I mean, we did an episode on this the other week about grief, and I feel like just so many people are going through that right now, and, like, you've been through it and stuff multiple times, and that's when that's, like, the worst thing that could possibly happen, I feel like. I mean, yeah, you can have injuries and stuff, but there's nothing that compares to, like, losing someone, and, like, it's just insane. So, how did you, like, kind of see God's grace and, like, his sovereignty and stuff through that loss?
Yeah, so a lot of it was just through the community around me. I realized that a lot of our mutual friends would reach out to me and kind of talk about salvation and talk about, okay, like I saw Ashley had this light about her, and I'd be like, let me tell you what that was, you know, like even Ashley herself would have said, like, it's the Lord, you know, and it's just so cool to know somebody that carried that light to where people have to ask what it is. If we're carrying a light that people can understand, then it's probably not from the Lord, right? Because we usually can't understand when people just have that glow about them, and she did, and I think a lot of it was the Lord's sovereignty, and that was just understanding and learning that it's His will, not ours, either way, and we can decide whether we're going to walk in it and joyfully, or if we're going to walk in it with bitterness and not really come out of it growing. So I think a lot of it with that was just kind of learning what suffering looked like, and that sanctification is a process, and that His will is going to be done ultimately, you know.
Oh, yeah. I think it's so important, like you said, just growing through everything. Like, you can take each day and, like, grow from it, and a lot of times we don't, but it's so important to, like, grow towards God, not away from God. Yeah. And stuff. And you said, what was that last part you said? Oh, it was so good. I have no idea. Oh, my gosh. You know what I'm talking about? Sanctification is a process. Yes, it is. For sure. Yeah. Like, it's an ongoing process. Yeah. And it's not just like, you know, it happens one day. It's like continuous. Yeah. Continuous.
Exactly.
For sure. Okay, so now tell us what's been going on in your life the past couple of years. You just had
some light stuff.
What, one brain surgery?
Yes, just one.
A brain surgery. That's it. Like, she had a brain surgery. So tell us what happened with that.
So it was fall of 2020. I started to feel off. I started to build up fluid in my ankles, and just kind of started having memory loss and headaches and all kinds of weird stuff.
Were you out of college?
Yes. Okay. So I was out of college. I had just moved back home to work because COVID had hit, and my job was just not even a thing anymore. And so I moved back home, and I started not feeling great. And then the following summer, I went to Mayo Clinic and found out that I had this rare brain condition called pseudotumor cerebri.
What in the world?
Right? It sounds scary, but basically it's like your brain is convinced that you have a brain tumor, so it builds up fluid, but it's usually caused by something underlying that they can't find. And so I actually got that diagnosis the same day I got a call from where I work in Jacksonville, and they said, "You got the job. You have to be here in 2 weeks." And I was like, okay, this is fun, and during a new diagnosis and moving within the same 2 weeks, this will be really interesting. So I feel like in that moment I was like, God, you're really going to have to come through, because this is like 7.5 hours away from my family, And so then I got the diagnosis and the meds weren't helping. And then fast forward another year to last September, so September 2022, we heard about this doctor in New York City that had just invented a surgery, helped invent it, to where they go through your leg and put stents in, but only if you qualify. And so it turned out that the veins in my brain were like shrinking and closing off.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And they're shrinking. So what can
So
that
it's like
cause?
there's this vein that goes from your heart to your brain back down, and it drains. And so basically it was all like, as my vein was narrowing, the blood was still trying to get through, and so it was causing fluid buildup, being like, hey, something's wrong.
Oh no.
And so it can actually cause blindness, it can cause you to die, it can cause all of these things, And
Well, that's terrifying to
Right.
hear that, I'm
Right.
sure.
And I feel like at the moment I was so sick, I was like, whatever
Oh my
happens,
goodness.
happens. So we went up there, and he actually looked at the screen, he pulled my MRI up, and he's like, do you see these veins? And I was like, yeah. He said, they're supposed to be really big, and yours are tiny, At least one is always big on everyone's head. But sometimes people have two big ones, and I had none. And so he was like, you qualify for the surgery. I was like, okay, what is it? And he's like, we go through your leg, and we weave stents into your brain and open them up, and it like causes the blood to flow or whatever. And he said, this was the cool part that was the Lord, is he said, do you see these little tiny veins that are sticking out? And I was like, yeah, it's weird. And he says, those actually built themselves to save your life. Like, they formed, just like the Lord is just so good. It's like, in that suffering, that's all I can think about. Like, he formed these little veins, made our bodies in such a way to where the blood was still flowing, keeping me from, like, the vein had, like, become deformed where it was just pooling. And so it was a hard time, for sure. And I found out I had brain surgery, and then I had it in October, so.
Oh my goodness. I don't even have words.
Yeah. What do you even say to that?
Right.
And then you found out, when did you find out you had diabetes on top of all this?
Yeah, so actually that was 2019.
Was
right
it that
before
long
COVID.
ago?
Yeah,
Wow.
right before COVID hit, I got diagnosed, and it was
Okay.
just woke up one day like so sick, and they thought I'd been in the honeymoon phase like while I was playing softball and everything, and I never had any problems, and then woke up one day like not feeling great, and sure enough, so.
You've just had it piled
Yeah.
on. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. So, you went to New York, you said October of this.
Or September of this past year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was like the risk involved with that? Like
Well, it's a pretty new surgery.
Yeah.
And so just like the risk altogether is just like, okay, hopefully it works, hopefully the blood flows. And usually people only need one stent going in, and I ended up needing 3.
what?
And so he actually came out and was like, I cannot believe that you were working full time, that you were not bedridden. He couldn't believe it. And I was like, that's the Lord. That is Jesus. That was not me. Like, I was barely making it out of bed, but it was him, and that just shows all together that, and it's cool that in those moments I could still be like, okay, but the Lord still got me, like I kind of had to give myself the church language in order to finally start believing it. It was like that prayer, like, I believe, help my unbelief,
Yeah.
But it's like during that whole time, even on the way to surgery, the Uber driver was like, oh, are you guys going to visit somebody? And I was like, no, I have brain surgery today. And he was like, you are so chill. And I was like, let me tell you about Jesus.
I remember you posted that or something, and I was like, what? And you were like posting stuff and just fine and acting like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's another normal day. And I was like telling my little Bible group through the week, I was like, pray for Taylor Wright. She's about to have brain surgery. And I was like, but she is just joyful through it all. Like, she's like, okay, God's got this. Like, he's got me, and you were. And it's like, that doesn't come from you, like, that type of strength is from God. And, like, you can't do that yourself. Like, if you would have tried, I can't talk. If you were to try, you would have probably been so much more stressed and like, oh gosh, like terrified of this. But you were like, okay, let's go. Like, let's do this thing. And then you're like, that's God. And that definitely is God.
I think I realized, Romans 5:3-5 talks about suffering. It produces endurance, which produces character, which produces hope. And I think I really lean on those verses, and they're now my favorite verses because of this. Because I realize that suffering is an honor. It's like suffering is a beautiful process that the Lord is like, I'm going to use you in this. In 2 Corinthians, where He's like, in your weakness, like my power is made perfect in your weakness. It's like it's not made okay in your weakness; it's made perfect. And so, like, therefore, suffering is necessary. And so, it's just. Once I looked at suffering as if it were an honor to glorify God, I think it's like now, not that I'm like, oh, let me suffer, but I think it's like when it happens, it's like, okay, God, how is this going to affect eternity? Not how is this going to affect the earth right now, and I think the Lord gives us stories to tell, and it's cool that I get my own little random story that's not random, but it's just kind of, whenever you don't really have anywhere else to look, I guess, then that's when you really see how important He is and His plan. It's like, okay, well, I can't muscle this out, so now what? And then once you see that, everything looks clearer,
I love that He gives us, like, certain verses or, like, I don't know, even worship songs or just, like, phrases or whatever that remind us of, like, how good He is and, like, how He will take care of us and stuff. Because I know before my injury and stuff with my leg and everything, there was, like, 2 years prior, I think, whenever COVID was, whenever quarantine was, and we got sent home from school and all that good stuff. I remember, like, I was reading my Bible and found this one verse, and I, like, it stuck in my head, and I was like, huh, that's weird. And then I think it was for a time such as my injury, and it's so cool how He did that for you as well. And He's like, hey, I'm right here. Like, you're going through this, but, like, I'm right here.
Yeah, and even how He's used yours, I mean, like, you're getting opportunities to speak, like you're doing the podcast, and it's like, people that, you feel like your life is together, you don't feel a need, and this sounds bad, but, like, when my life is going smooth, I don't feel as much of an urgency to, like, scream the gospel from the rooftops, and it's like, in those stories, you don't hear someone telling their testimony that's like, yeah, I was fine, I just believe God, that's cool. It's like, no, I went through this really terrible time and was like, I'm not going to make it out, and God delivered me from that. And so it's like, we need to live in an urgency that suffering does produce endurance, and endurance does produce character. It's like, it didn't just say suffering produces hope. It's like suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope. It's back to, like, sanctification being the process. And once we can see that, I think you kind of become thankful for it. You're like, God, like, use this for your glory. Like, use it for the podcast, like, you're getting to speak and pour into people's lives now because of your suffering, and it's just beautiful the way that God even connects people in that,
Oh, I know. Yeah. And how crazy that is it? Like, I always think, like, Trey and I, it was so weird that we were at the same school and together and stuff, and, like, we met each other in, like, the same time we were there, and we had so many different places we could have gone, and, like, same with you, like, and if I didn't meet you, like, who knows if I would have actually, like, wanted a relationship with the Lord, because, like, I kind of knew Him, but, like, I got that relationship, and it's like, you were there, and how crazy is that? Like, we played together, and, like, I transferred, I don't know, it's just in my head that stuff, like, amazes me. And I know this was a while ago, but, like you were saying, like, the veins in your brain and stuff, like, how He made our bodies, like, I think about that all the time. I'm like, how did He make our bodies, and, like, think of all these things that we needed, and, like, what? It's designed so beautifully and, like, so intricately, and it's just insane. Like, that's just a little glimpse of what He can do, and we have no idea of what all He can do, because that's just over our heads, but I think it's beautiful to be reminded of just little things like that.
It is, and it's like those little things make up the whole body, of Christ. And something that I feel like I go back to a lot is when you eat something sweet, you're just like, oh, this is sweet, but if you eat something bitter and then you eat something sweet, the sweet is, like, magnified, right? It's like, this is so sweet, it's almost, like, unbearable. And so it's kind of like that with our suffering, is whenever I taste the bitter, I can, like, really savor that sweetness that comes from the Lord and His sovereignty in those seasons of suffering. And I think coming back to just being seasons, it's like, this is a season. And so even if it's, like, the worst season of my life, it's still a season. And on the other side of this, I know that he's just equipping me for something bigger, you know, and something for his glory. And it's hard to remember that sometimes when you're in the muck, but having the eternal vision helps a lot too.
Oh, I like that. Eternal vision.
That's good.
It's like, I don't know, I just have like a picture in my head, like, now, like, just me looking up to God, like,
Right?
okay.
Like putting on glasses,
Yeah.
you know, it's just like, okay, I can see this,
Yeah,
you know, and it's like, even if he doesn't reveal to me why things happen, you know, or, okay, like, it's not for me to know why, you know, if it was for us to know why, he would have written it out and in plain words for us to know, and some things we're not meant to know until eternity. And I think once you become okay with that, and you're like, either way his will is going to be done, like, I would much rather be able to savor it than to be bitter about it and kind of disregard him and then come back to it, because I know at some point I'm going to be like, oh, okay, God, I see your hand in that, my bad for not like really seeing it then, you know.
That's like so beautiful when you like look back and just see how his hand was through it all, and it's like, whoa. And like you said, I mean, we probably won't realize a lot of things on this earth that he's like calling us to do or like equipping us for, or, I don't know, just every conversation we have, we may not know why we're having that and stuff, but you know, we're not here for us, we're here for God, and it's important to know that, because I mean, we're not going to be here one day, but like, you know, our grandchildren may be if, you know, the world's still here at that point.
Who knows?
But it's like, we're the generation, like, we have to teach other people about Jesus so they can know him and stuff. Because if we don't, like, if we don't speak his word and we don't, you know, act like followers of Christ and stuff, nobody below us or nobody that's just growing up, or I mean, even older people, nobody else is going to know who he is. So it's our job to like speak the word and act like followers of Jesus and stuff.
Yeah, because even our works are like filthy rags, right? And so it's like, if that's the case, then like, let it not be my works, you know, let it be his. And anytime I talk about the Lord, let it not be, oh, well, I had this brain surgery and I came out of it like this. Let it be like, the Lord allowed me to have this brain surgery. And so it's like, whenever you even look at it, like, the God of the universe wrote out this plan for me. Does it look how I thought it would? No, but like, it'd be kind of boring if it looked like I thought it would, you know? And I think it just kind of made me enjoy the small things. And like, you know me, like, I joke about like probably stuff that's like really dark humor.
You do. You would like, I'd be like, is she okay? Like, you just be cracking up about stuff that people would be like bawling their eyes out about, and we're like,
what's wrong with this girl?
Like, in the training room.
And it's like,
that was the place.
Right? And so it's like, I can either choose, and there is a time to weep, you know, and a time to mourn, but at the same time, there are also even more times to find joy and to find that laughter in that darkness, you know, because in those moments when everyone's like, why, like, I want to be that person, and I want the Lord to allow me to be that person, for everyone to be like, why is she laughing? Like, why is she smiling? Why is this such a, like, joyful time for her? What is her problem? Like, I want people to be like, why are you crazy? You know? And it's like, it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit in me, and he's equipping me to be, and, you know, that light is bright, and I want to be that, you know, and I think but it requires suffering, and it's not easy to become who God calls us to be, but it's like a molding, you know, it's not easy to, whenever you're picking up a garden, you have to like get all the weeds out, and you have to like dig, and then you plant the seed, and it takes forever for the seed to grow. It's like, that's suffering, you know, but it ends up reaping a harvest, and you just have to kind of keep your eyes on that, I guess.
Yeah, that's beautiful. All I can think of right now is like, wait, there's the training room when you like tore your rotator cuff. Is that what you tore?
Well,
or something in your elbow?
I tore my labrum, but they were like, we don't even know what's wrong. You got a lot of stuff wrong. But I was like, I don't even want surgery. Forget it. I still didn't have surgery.
I could just see you just like laughing about like, yeah, I tore something in my arm, whatever. Like,
I was like, I'm still playing.
That's just been in my head since
I'm not registering.
No.
I said, I just want to graduate. I want to retire.
Bunch of washed up athletes on this podcast
we
right
are.
now, but
we're proud of it.
Yes, for sure. But you said something about like looking for the good or looking for joy or whatever in your suffering and everything you're going through. I think that's so important. Like, we have to look for opportunities to just like see the goodness that God brings during our suffering and like see that we have an option, that we can let this consume us and like bring us down, or we can lift God up during this time, and allow him to work through us like he intends to. So that's so important. Like, we have to just look.
Yeah, and it's nice
Fine.
because it takes pressure off either way, you know, and
Yeah.
even whenever I decide that I just want to pout, and I'm like, God, you know what, I just need to pout about this, and I don't even want to deal with you right now. We say that with our actions all the time, but it's even there, like, the cross did not void that. You know, like, the cross was even for those moments, and so I think it's like I've given myself a grace and taken this pressure off of, like, okay, I have to be the, you know, one that's smiling, and I have to be the one, I had brain surgery, but it's fine. You know, I do say that as a joke, but I think even now I can be like, yeah, it kind of was the worst. But, you know, like, at the same time, I can either choose to think about how sick I was and how much it changed me as a person and how I just wasn't myself, or I can think, okay, but, like, because that happened, I now know who I am more. I know who I am more now than I ever have. And but God still allows us to pout because we're children, right? Like, we're lost sheep. And it's just nice to know that either way, no matter what I feel, that those feelings are, you know, even though they might not be correct because they're not eternal feelings, I think it's still nice to know that he still meets us there. You know, like, there's no pit so deep that he's not deeper still. And so even when I do want to pout, he's like, it's okay, I'm here when you're ready, you know, and he's not going anywhere. So that's kind of takes the pressure off to be that person that's, oh, I'm suffering, but it's fine, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I like how you say, like, we're a child. You know, like, how often do we think of that? Like, I don't know, that just kind of hit me because I'm like, you know, I'm a grown-up now, and I feel like I've got it all myself, like, I can do it all myself, but it's like, no, like, you're still a child. In God's eyes, like, you're his child.
Yeah.
So that's so beautiful.
Right. And I know Justin even says all the time, he's like, when you got saved is like when your birthday is. So he's like, you're a baby Christian if you've been saved for however many years. And it kind of helps me feel a lot better because I'm like, okay, well, I'm technically this old, you know, so it's like, but even then there's still grace for that. And I think it's just so comforting to know that, you know, there's no pressure to be any kind of way to impress people or be like, okay, I need people to know I love Jesus, so I need to buck up and be like, yeah, the Lord has a plan for this. It's like, no, this sucks, but he's still good, you know, and it's just that honesty and that authenticity that really leads people to Christ. It's not the show of, oh, I'm suffering, but it's the Lord's plan, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is misleading a lot of the time, and it's hard because when people suffer, they're like, this is not what she said this was going to feel like.
For sure. And I feel like a lot of people do kind of, you know, act like, I don't know, try to force how they feel and stuff, or I don't know the right words. Force how something. I don't know what I'm saying. You know what
Just
I'm saying?
kind of like sugarcoat Christianity.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Right, it's
Sugarcoat
like,
Christianity.
yeah.
That is perfect. And then it's like, then everybody else, like you're saying, is like, oh, this is not what it's like for me. But I mean, it's different for everybody. But it's so important to just be who God called you to be and like act how you are. And I think for so long I kind of not tried to act like other people because I hated that, but like I was like embarrassed to like be my true self, like you know, fully act how I am today. And it was like I felt like I'd be judged by people and stuff. And it's like let loose, and God, you know, gives everybody different personalities. So like really just shine your personality, and God will shine through. I mean, your quirkiness or your I don't know, whatever other personality. That was a weird word that just came. Quirkiness. Weirdness, your weirdness, whatever. And yeah, I have no idea what I'm saying right now. I'm like,
you're good.
I ate right before here, and now I'm like crashing out. I can't even talk anymore. Okay.
It's a struggle for sure.
Excuse me, guys.
But well, your authenticity is welcome. You know what I mean? It's like this isn't supposed to even be a sugar-coated podcast. Like this is authenticity, and that's not how the world portrays anything on social media or even in life. And it kind of makes everyone else be like, oh, well, my life doesn't look like that. So does that mean that I'm not following the Lord right, or does that mean this? And I think something that helps a lot is kind of going back to, like, even Jesus wept, you know? So sorry.
Yeah.
I would not have
She is
brought her
hearing
if I
people
knew she was gonna
outside.
do that.
No, she's our guest. We have two guests
She's
today.
our guard dog, apparently.
First time with two guests.
Right. But, you know, I think it goes back to, like, a lot, because I know for me, I just want to make it funny. And I'm like, how can I make this a joke? When in reality, God's like, hey, just a reminder, like, Jesus wept, you know, and so it's time for you to weep. And I'm like, you know, or we could ignore the feelings. And God's like, no, like, be who you are. Be where I have you, because you're in my will, you know, and if I'm in his will, then even those feelings that feel kind of ick are, like, necessary. But I think, like you said, everyone walks it differently. Everyone suffers differently. And but I think it just goes back to, like, how can I suffer well? And how can I suffer with an eternal perspective or whatever?
Yeah. Well, in the Bible, I mean, Jesus suffered probably more than any person ever. I mean, Jesus' people suffered. I mean, in the desert for, 40 years, battles, slavery, the whole nine. So, like, I mean, signing up for Christianity is basically signing up for some type of suffering to some degree. Like, everyone suffers at different rates, I mean, you read Job. Job kind of had it bad. I mean, I wouldn't say any of us have had it as bad as that dude.
Yeah.
Right. He's on the struggle bus.
Yeah. But I mean, like, everyone suffers. So, I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. But God uses that suffering to kind of mold you into who you need to be to fit into his kingdom. And that's kind of how I take it. Is you hear all the people like, Tim Tebow and all those guys that are talking. At some point, what?
She's just met him before.
Oh, yeah.
Every time I think of his name, I just think.
Well, yeah. But I mean, like, something has happened in their life that's kind of shaped them and molded them to be who they are. And I think it's just one big puzzle that kind of goes together, and God's just kind of playing with the pieces.
Yeah, and it's like, find somewhere in the Bible where someone was like, yeah, my life was great, so I was seeking Jesus, like the woman that touched his garment. It wasn't like, oh, I'm doing great, so I'm just going to touch his garment because he's Jesus. I want to say I touched him. It's like, no, I was bleeding for 12 years and I need help, and everyone that came begging Jesus for help, it wasn't, out of a way of like, oh, my life's great and everything's okay. It's like, no, I have nowhere else to go, and so I'm just going to, like, try Jesus because he's what I have left. And then you realize all along, like, oh, this is what this is supposed to be about, But that's such a good point. Like, I don't really there are way more stories that we can say of stuff that went wrong in our eyes, but every single thing has made a turnaround. And I think of Elijah, he was depressed, and he was like, God, take me. Like, I want to be dead, like, take me now. And God was like, take a nap and eat a snack. and then we'll talk. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm good. Like, never mind. And it's like, sometimes you just need a snack and a nap, And it's like, but it's cool how God met him there. Like, God could have easily said, you just feel like this right now, but, like, you'll feel better soon. He could have easily said, well, this is my plan, so you can just chill. But the sweetness happens in those moments where I'm like, what now? And it's like, where we can't go any farther. God's like, now it's time to go up. Now it's time to listen to me. And he lets us do that. He lets us fall. And but he always makes it come back around full circle. And it's reassuring, that we have that to lean on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, one more question, because you were a huge help with me, like I've told everybody. In my walk of faith. Well, yeah, like, through you. Okay. If people don't know God out there that are listening to this podcast or have questions about him or whatever, what kind of advice could you give them?
The first thing that he puts on my mind is that God is not intimidated by our questions, and God is not intimidated by our doubts. He is God, and he already knows our doubts. And so I think really anyone that I've known that has tried to disprove that God exists ends up finding that he is real. Yeah. And so I think it's like, ask those questions and seek out people that are Christians. Even ask, people that aren't, like, how do you deal with stuff, because God is always going to make himself known where people allow him to be. And so ask those questions and just kind of watch him work and watch him show you who he really is and find that hope in him. Because you'll know, you feel that conviction to turn over to him and to trust him. And but yeah, just ask those hard questions because he's not afraid of them and he still loves you. And he, we're all sheep and he's going out to find the one, and that's what we're called to do. So
For sure. Well, thank you, and we will talk to you guys next week. Bye.